Cute, furry, social. What do we really know of the chinchilla? Originally found in the Andes Mountains, once trafficked around the world for profit and exploitation. These beautiful creatures once lived in solitude amongst the people of the Americas. For the first time in history, we'll bring you the full story, tragedy, and obvious beauty of the world's greatest rodent, the chinchilla. The chinchilla lives longer than any other small furry and has the softest fur in the world. Chinchillas have roamed through South America for thousands of years, but to know the chinchilla, you must first know the land. It's an ancient world that stands out from Africa, India, and Europe alone. A misunderstood culture where sacrifice brings bounty. Ancient Americas, pre-Columbia. A great kingdom of people ruled the hills and valleys of this beautiful land. In the interior of Peru, closest to the rivers, there was the Chinchas. The Chinchas was a strong culture of the ancient Peruvians. Their stronghold was in Peru's southwest, near the Pacific Ocean. The Chincha culture flourished in the late intermediate period between 900 CE to 1450 CE, starting from the coast of Peru to the Andes highlands. The Chincha worshipped the jaguar god, which made them spiritually a strong culture. They believed they descended from jaguars. They would take over smaller tribes and villages, usually for conversion over pillage. They would take over the whole valley and become a Chincha state. The chinchilla furs were worn to the Chincha people as a symbol of royalty. This is a culture that you rarely hear about, but deserves the same level of respect as the Incas and the Aztecs. They built a network of rivers and streams, and dozens of roads, which branched out to La Centinela, which covered 190 acres, and was used for ceremonial purposes and rituals. It's also home to two of America's unknown pyramids. As masters of agriculture, they would fertilize their fields with dead birds and guano. They also taught each other technologies in seafaring and how to build ships with balsa logs. They used the llama to carry heavy loads to reach high points in the Andes Mountains. The Chinchas who traveled by sea worshipped the star Chandri to help them navigate to places like Ecuador and other lands closer to Peru. As the Chinchas grew going towards the north, the Incas was moving closer towards the south. These two empires would eventually meet. The first contact between the Incas and the Chinchas was the result of an expedition led by General Yapak Yucampi, brother of the late Pachacute. The Chincha presented the Incas with pelts as gifts, along with trinkets and figurines made of gold. After the Incas destroyed the economy of the Chimo, who controlled the northwest coast of Peru, the Incas gave the remaining power of the Chimo to the Chincha. The Inca and the Chimo stood side by side in the civilization. They shared the same views in politics and shared ritual ceremonies together. The Chinchas were 30,000 strong, 12,000 of who were agriculturalists, 10,000 fishermen, and 6,000 traders. But life in the Americas would be forever changed after a visit from a few unwanted guests. By now, the entire Andes had fallen under the Inca, including the Chinchilla. But a group of men, led by Francisco Pizarro, has been back and forth to the Americas in the past few years, has landed on the coast, unknowingly to the Incas and with bad intention. 1534, the Spanish arrived in the Chincha Valley. The ruler of the Chincha was the only one carried on a litter, during the meeting with Pizarro and his men. They had already took over some of the territory in the past 2 years, all in the name of gold. The following events of this decade will be some of the cruelest against mankind. The Chinchillas watched from the mountaintops as the land succumbed to a foreign power. The population of the Chincha began to decline. This was the result of European diseases that spread throughout the land. 99% of the Chincha population disappeared after the first 80 years of the Spanish rule. The Americas has been under the care of the people for thousands of years. It would now be under the care of total strangers. But this was only the beginning for the mysterious Chinchilla, and they would retreat into the Andes Mountains. European explorers made the chinchilla extremely popular in the 1700s, but the cost only made it affordable to the rich, and it was worn by foreign royalty, American slave traders, and wives of the rich. Trappers nearly decimated the population of the chinchilla. In 1899, a man dubbed the Chinchilla King, Richard Blick of Leipzig, Germany, crafted 378,500 chinchilla pelts. In 1900 and 1901, they trapped over 1 million chinchillas and shipped them to Europe. Finally, the South American government passed laws to ban trapping of the chin. Chile, 1918. The entire land of the Americas has been modernized. Life is good. For now, nature remains undisturbed. Chile has also been home to the chinchillas for thousands of years, but life for the chinchilla will be changed forever. This is Mathias Chapman, a European explorer, born in Williams, Oregon, June 29, 1882. Not much is known about Chapman's childhood, but in 1918, he travels to South America and starts a career at the Anaconda Wire and Cable, a copper manufacturing company. This would bring him to the dry mountain regions of Chile. One day while enjoying lunch, the men were approached by a native who obtained a small furry animal which he held in a tin can. This man was attempting to sell the chinchilla, and after the exchange, Chapman attempted to cool the little guy off with some water. This immediately alerted the Peruvians, who explained to Chapman that the chinchilla is not to be around any water. They believed at that time that chinchillas lived without ever coming in contact with any water. They also explained to Chapman the bathing tactics of the chinchilla, how they bathe in dust and volcano ash. This all was crucial to the lifespan of the chinchilla. And after one night with his new furry, Chapman was completely interested. In 1919, Chapman came up with a plan to get as many chinchillas as possible and transport them to the U.S., all in good faith, to breed and to give the Americans a chinchilla experience. He then gathered a crew of men and set out to trap as many as possible. But there were many different types of chinchillas. First, you had the Costina, which was a smaller type and was found in lower altitudes of the region. Then you had the slightly larger La Negra types, which were found in interior and upper areas of the mountains. Then there was the Barricadada chinchilla, which were found in the most remote areas of the mountains. So in hindsight, the search was never going to be easy. First, it took Chapman 3 years just to get 11 chinchillas. And the trips were extremely exhausting to his men, because the chinchillas were 14,000 to 18,000 feet above sea level. One man, who worked under Chapman, complained that it took him 4 weeks to get back from where his chinchilla was found. The efforts that Chapman and his crew made to acquire the chinchillas showed the determination that Chapman and his crew had to bring the chinchillas to Western societies. The conditions to get back and forth proved this to be true. These were the years 1919 to 1922. The men didn't know which type of chinchilla each one was, but they knew that each one was different. Among the 11 was 3 females. This is Dona Inez Suez, Chapman's favorite, one of the original 11 chinchillas. The Costina and the La Negra chinchilla can interbreed, but if any of the two mate with the Barricadada chinchilla, they will produce sterile offsprings. Most of the chinchillas that Chapman and his men acquired were in the Rio Junco Valley, but it's said that the men has also traveled up to the Andes in Peru. Chapman eventually returned to his home in Pacho Rios, Chile. It's been a long journey and rest is needed. His home sat at an elevation of 10,400 feet and was also home to chinchillas. Being that a chilla's fur is so thick, It can easily overheat at 70 degrees. So Chapman constructed large wooden cages. They were shaded from direct sunlight and often surrounded with ice cubes. Thanks to these innovations, all 11 chinchillas made it back safely. But this wouldn't be the case for all chinchillas. It was now time for Chapman to get permission to bring the chinchillas to the United States. His request has continuously been denied by the Chilean government. But consistency pays off, and in 1923, the Chilean government grants him permission to export the chinchillas. Chapman, alongside his wife and the 11 chinchillas, are moved down a mountain and transported by rail to Palena on the Chilean coast. They were then put on a steamer, which took them from Palena to Callao. From there, Chapman, along with the chinchillas, boarded a Japanese freighter, Anu Maru, and the freighter would take them to San Pedro, California. They also had the other chinchillas that the men trapped. The men hid the chinchillas in their coat pockets, and it wasn't until they were out at sea that Chapman mentioned to the captain that the chinchillas was aboard. The Japanese captain was offended, but the Chapmans threatened to sue if anything happened to the chinchillas. To fight the heat, the Chapmans took turns refilling the ice that held the drapes together on the chinchilla cage with frozen cold, wet towels. Once they reached California, there were 12 chinchillas instead of the original 11. One had died, and the mother had given birth to 2. The 12 lived in Los Angeles with Chapman until America's first chinchilla farm was built in the high desert area of Tehachapi, California. And it was also here that the problems began. First, there was a chemical matter in the local spring water, which made the chinchillas sick. Also, since the chinchillas were having problems reproducing, they thought the water was the cause. We now know that the different mixtures of species of chinchillas will cause this. Back at the Tehachapi farm, you had the thieves. A pair of men broke into the farm and broke the chinchillas' lock. They loaded the chinchillas into a car and drove off. But the men were uneducated about the chinchilla. They were driven across the hot desert, causing many of the chinchillas to perish. Chapman then put in efforts to secure the chinchillas. The remaining chins were taken to Brownsville, Texas, loaded on a tramp steamer, and taken to Europe. But the plan backfired, and the European authorities took the chinchillas and had them turned over to a Dr. Muller, where they lived out the rest of their days. After taking the losses, Chapman returned to the Los Angeles area, 4957 West 104th Street in Inglewood, California. Now, Chapman was motivated to make the chinchillas an outdoor sanctuary. A little cement, brick, and soil, he improvised. He placed the soil in the ceiling to make a more cooler insulation. Above the ceiling was an airspace a foot in length, and a cage big enough for a man to stand up and walk through, a net box and dry dirt for bathing. Chapman was setting it out to prove that it's not about the economics with the chins, but the care and nurturing, the diet, and the many ways and personalities that will improve the longevity of life of the chinchilla. To be able to continue a thriving farm, he continued this practice. By the late 20s, chinchilla populations expanded 35% in the United States. He began offering a few up for sale, going as high as 3,200 a pair. By 1930, the population was up 60%. M.F. Chapman died December 26, 1934, in Inglewood, California. All of the chinchillas used as pets in the world today can be traced back to Chapman's original 11 that he captured in the Andes in the 1920s. Some of these original 11 had survived him. The 8th one, being the 8th one that he captured, had lived 22 years. They named him Old Hoff, after the German blacksmith who built the first chinchilla cages used to transport the chinchillas across the coastal waters. Chapman's son, R.E. Chapman, continued the family business, the world's original South American chinchilla farm, in 1942. But the world was forever changed. The family now had hundreds of ranches worldwide, and advertising will cause a massive boom. By the late 40s, each female chinchilla were having 2 babies a year, with 1 on the way. And the new chinchilla cage has been invented, where droppings could fall to a lower level, instead of the chins having to play and sleep near droppings. This new innovation proved to be productive. The fur of the chins became more softer and more dense. By the 1950s, more and more people had chinchillas, for breeding and for profit. Easy money was the motivation. Singers and movie stars flocked to the chinchilla fur coats. but without the proper acknowledgement, or chinchillas would fall to poor health, and breeders would have to innovate depending on the climate of their town. Chinchillas were rarely known to be house pets, but now you had thousands of ranches across the United States and Canada, and by 1960, anyone could purchase a furry through local advertisement. One particular magazine had an ad which chinchillas were being sold for $100, evidence that the chinchilla was becoming more common and more attainable. Ads would describe them as little fur balls, quiet, odorless, and vermin-free. But the chinchillas were so much more. Each chinchilla has its own unique personality, and some would even show traits of stubbornness if not taken care of properly. Breeders would usually purchase the chins in pairs and focus on continuous birth and resale of the chinchilla. But this would all change when once again, all attention would go to commercial pelt production companies. 1971. Over 1 million chinchillas now live here in America. The time of selling pairs to American civilians had faded. Big-time breeders now focused on selling to pelt industries. All of the world's most notable stars indulged in the purchasing of furs. Magazine ads would fly off the shelves. But chinchillas are quiet, delicate, social, and they can jump almost 6 feet. But this wouldn't stop the media, entertainers, and the wealthy from promoting furs as a top luxury item. But it was short-lived. March 22, 1980. The People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals is formed. They will focus on animal cruelty and mistreatment of all kinds. In the years to come, they will expose every industry involving every animal in every country. As they quietly build information, the fur trade boomed all through the 1980s. But the booming business again would have to endure the changes of the world. Because of PETA, they now face turndowns and less clientele. Breeders now begin selling newly weaned babies to science labs for medical research for as low as $10. With the mother losing her newborn, the female chinchillas had to be devastated. By the 1990s, pet sales would plummet so far down that an entire new type of breeder was born. Across the country, chinchilla owners became dedicated to only live, healthy chinchilla sales. A new respect for the furry emerged in society along with a new generation of breeders. Children and adults alike were now looking into exotic pets to add to the household. The internet helped with understanding the health and lifestyle of chinchillas. Internet forums and state-to-state chapters were formed mainly for chinchilla owners, dedicated to the nurturing and care of the furry animal. But nothing's etched in stone, and there was still a dark side. In the year 2000, it was said to be 25 chinchilla farms in Sweden. But the times had changed. The world had advanced, and so did PETA. They continued to protest at fashion shows, parties, and intercepting interviews with their most famous pop icons. Pressure like this caused farms all over the world to close, including all 25 in Sweden. Breeders and farms would continue to go deeper underground and out of the eye of animal activists. In 2014, PETA rescued hundreds of chinchillas from breeders outside of San Diego. The owners of the Adams Valley Ranch claimed they only bred for pet sale, but a PETA investigator went undercover with a hidden camera and shocked the entire chinchilla community. An elderly owner said if she couldn't sell her business, she would dispose of her chinchillas. But the video caught chinchillas either being killed by hand or electrocuted. This destroyed the reputation of the farm, which stood for over 50 years. A raid was launched and PETA rescued the entire farm of chinchillas. The owner later sued and a judge dismissed the suit, proving the allegations were true. Even after all these efforts, chinchilla abuse at these breeding facilities will continue to be brought to light, with animal abuse in over 4 countries in the past 10 years. This compelled pop stars and public figures to denounce the purchase of furs, and those who already own furs stopped wearing them altogether. We now know it takes over 150 individual chinchillas to make one fur coat, over 200 to make a bedspread, and costs as much as $10,000. People everywhere began to think, do we really need furs? Are furs really needed in the winter with the countless genres of fashion that we have in today's modern society? But still, some will try. 2020, the Molten Chinchilla Ranch in Chatfield, Minnesota. Hidden cameras exposed 1,000 chinchillas living in tiny cages, sleeping in filth, and some had died from diseases. The ranch didn't close, but their reputation was destroyed and they lost clientele like the well-known Atlas Pet Supply, with locations in Stillwater and Blaine. Also lost was the Rochester College's veterinary program. It was a 3-year investigation that ended in 2017. The owner has been cited 112 times for violations as early as May 2021. What makes this a landmark case is that this facility is the only one that supplies government scientists with small animals. The small rodents that scientists have been using for research had wounds, sores, and were in poor health. Trial began July 26, 2021. Thanks to PETA, the survival rate of the chinchilla continues to rise, slowly, but it is rising. It's said today that only around 3 pelters exist in the United States. Chinchilla shows still exist, but not many show up. These shows no longer draw large crowds. Because there's no money involved, only chinchilla owners who care for the nurturing and health of the chinchilla. Nowadays, you must be USDA certified to sell to a wholesaler who pays anywhere between $25 and $60 for each chinchilla, and sold at retail around $150. The days of the fur farm has slowly faded. Today's generation is more focused on preserving and nurturing nature and its animal inhabitants. And with the threat of global warming, should have us considering treating every living organism and being on this earth and throughout the universe equally.